I'm Master Saturn. Thank you for joining me for another BDSM United podcast in our ABCs of BDSM series that we're in right now. People often start out in the world of BDSM with a rather fuzzy understanding of who they are and what they want. A lot of times we don't know because we haven't taken a personal inventory of ourselves, so we just don't know. Really, a lot of times we don't stop and look in the mirror long enough or honestly enough to see who we really are and to know what we're about. And oftentimes we don't know what we want because we don't know what's available. We don't know what to think. I always like to ask people I always like the kinds of people that help me think about the things that I don't know to think about. And with BDSM, because you're opening yourself up to a new culture and a new lifestyle, you're not going to know what you want because you're just not going to know things. There's things you're just not going to know right off the bat. In fact, much of the fun of exploring this world comes from watching yourself grow, develop, and bloom into the person you didn't know was inside you. I know personally this has happened with me numerous times in my life, but especially in BDSM. I started out with a nickname Primal Piggy that was more focused on kinks and the kinds of things that I enjoyed. And I've enjoyed watching myself grow and develop so much that I'm now more comfortable taking the name or the honorific Master Saturn, because I am honestly working towards and growing towards a deeper level of self-mastery. So oftentimes you don't know what's inside you. For some parts of me, I didn't know how deep the rabbit hole went. I didn't know just how kinky or just how sadistic I really was. And I discovered over time the level that exists in me now of those things. This line of thought raises an interesting and a relevant question. How were you guided to become the person you are? Think back to when you were a teenager and you started dating. What kind of advice did your parents give you, if any? And what kind of advice did you give, or what kind of advice, if you're a parent, did you give your own kids? Things like play nicely with others, be a nice person, respect your elders, find nice friends, do well in school, stay in school till you graduate, be polite, be well spoken, use nice table manners. You're only as good as your word. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you, and so on. There's nothing wrong with such maxims. You recognize them and you know those and many more, and depending on your culture, they may differ. But here's where we're going with this. My guess is that when your personality was forming in adolescence, nobody suggested that you look into yourself and you try to figure out whether you were a dominant, a submissive, or something else. Whether you were a masochist or a sadist. Whether you were more of a giver or more of a receiver. Whether you liked pain and under what conditions, or whether you liked being spanked, teased, or tied up, or preferred doing that to others. Now, we promise that you'll learn more about yourself as you gain experience within our culture. But not everyone can be neatly classified as a dom, a dame, or a sub. Not only are such traits influenced by cultural rules and by a person's upbringing, but the way people present themselves is contextual. What is going on around people oftentimes influences both how they behave and how they're perceived by others. What's intended as politeness may be taken by some as being submissive. A wary submissive may give off signals of dominance as a form of emotional self-defense. Normally laid back and mild-mannered people can become aggressively dominant when they perceive a threat to themselves or to a loved one. No, a friend on FetLife wrote Robert Rubel one time about the confusion she was experiencing as she tried to figure out who she is in order to explain herself to potential partners. As she called in, she wrote, "So far, I know the following about me." And this is an example for all of us. I'm not sure where exactly I fit in relation to roles or identities. Dame, top, sub, bottom. So I identify as versatile or as a switch. I definitely have dominance in my personality, but I don't know if I'm a full dame. I have a sadistic side for sure, but I prefer to focus more on what a boy does for me in the realm of service. I love having service type boys, and I'm not a service type uh, or domesticated kind of woman in this example. I don't want to have to make all the decisions. Even if I had a boy, I would ask if he wants to do XYZ versus telling him that we're now going to do XYZ. I can casually dominate someone, but I can't casually submit to them, as submitting, at least to me, involves emotional attachment and a much greater chance of getting deeply hurt. I dominate without sex, as none of the boys that I've yet met have demonstrated a long-term serious commitment where I wanted to have sex. Sex would have to be within a committed relationship. I'm very open to various BDSM activities as long as there is no sex. These can be casual or even short-term relationships. I'm a masochist for sure, and when it comes to sex or the bedroom, I'm more of a follower, submissive, sexually, than a leader. Yet outside of the bedroom and outside of sex, I'm very assertive. As a sub, I can give up some, not all control in a relationship for fun and play, but don't try to control me 24/7 or I'll withdraw and put up a fight or argument. As a more submissive person, when I'm in that mindset, I'm less into service and control. Though that changes depending on how deeply in love I am and how much I want to please him. I'm definitely into activities such as bondage, spanking, flogging, etc. The person in this example realized that whether you're dominant or submissive, you should know what makes you tick. A woman might say, I like to serve, but I don't like to be told what to do. A man might say, I make decisions all day long and I don't want to be asked my opinion when I get home. Just tell me what to do. Someone might say, in general, I'm a dominant, but I occasionally find a person to whom I could submit. As we've said repeatedly, you can reinvent yourself within BDSM. But few people do, either because it hadn't occurred to them that they could or because it seemed like too much work. Remember this, though, as you enter the BDSM world, nobody knows the old you unless you tell them. Once you're here, fellow Kingsters are much more understanding generally if you decide to explore hidden sides of yourself. You can release the dominant or the submissive within you, and your BDSM friends will still be your friends. At least that's how it's supposed to work. So, I do encourage you and urge you, though, don't swing really far with pendulums. Ease yourself into different types of things as you explore. And make sure you're honest with people. Don't go changing your FetLife profile from, submissive slave to master to to this or that. Just keep it honest that you're exploring, and uh, and you're evolving even, and just gradually dip your toes in things that you may be interested in, and don't jump just headfirst into everything that comes your way, especially when it has to do with relationships and what type of identity that you may be looking for. Also, don't necessarily, until you find a committed relationship, don't be tossed to and fro by every little person that enters your world. If you begin talking to somebody and they're a dominant, don't automatically change your identity to submissive just because you are talking to a dominant. Because a lot of times, as you go through the vetting process and as you just go through considering who the person is, you may like them initially, but you may not like them overall, or vice versa. They may be somewhat interested into you at first, but then they may identify things about you that just aren't the submissive they would be looking for, or the partner even that they would be looking for. So don't go just changing your identity based on the first few relationships that you come across or people that you're talking to. Keep it at exploring. You can be exploring and be talking to a dominant and not yet ready to identify yourself as submissive. That's perfectly okay. Everyone should be all right with that. Or vice versa. You can be talking to a submissive and not yet ready to be label yourself as a dominant. You can just be exploring. You can be evolving. You can be changing until you get into something that is more established. Before you begin to explore the identities you'll play in this culture, take the time to understand their subtleties. Regardless of how others define them, the important part is how you and your partners define these words, these identities within your specific relationships. We encourage people to check out a book by Robert Rubel. It's one that we teach out of. It's called BDSM Mastery, Relationships, a guide for creating mindful relationships for dominants and submissives. You could find it on Amazon, for instance, or anywhere that books are sold online. If you aren't completely happy with yourself, you have the opportunity to change yourself so that you are happier. You can find what you're looking for, maybe even before you're sure you know what it is. I'm Master Saturn. Thank you for joining me for this BDSM United podcast as we work through more of the ABCs of BDSM in this series. You can find all of our resources online at www.bdsmunited.com. We have a blog, a really large Facebook page. We have, you can find things on YouTube. There's a lot that we are creating and a lot more that are in the works. We value BDSM education. We feel that when adults are educated on nonviolent, consensual, traditional BDSM, that it makes our entire BDSM community better. And so we urge education. Education is our kink. Thank you for joining me today. It was a joy speaking with you, and I'll talk with you more again soon.